someone had posed the question that like, if you benefit from racism, does that inherently make you racist?
Mm.
And I remember like really pausing on that and like trying to unpack it. We think for a lot of white people still, to them, racism is, segregation, um, the white hood and the KKK, lynchings, the little they know about Jim Crow, to them, racism isn't, the microaggressions, which I even
Mhm.
hate calling them microaggressions because when they happen, they don't feel micro.
Mm.
Your body has reactions to things, when I think when people say, in the past, when people have said to me, like, oh, you speak so well, or you're pretty for a black girl, or, you are the whitest black girl I've ever met. To me, those things are triggering. They hurt and they don't feel micro. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so even that in itself, I hate that term. But I think for a lot of people, they don't see the connection of how, like you said, the little R's add up. Like, I think also, and not just white people, I think we confuse the meaning between like racism, prejudice, and bigotry. I think we look at a lot of things um, that as I think a lot of things are defined as racism that isn't, and vice versa. But like understanding that it's racism is a structural thing, and then there's all these offshoots that come because like the effects of it. You know what I mean? That people like don't ever understand. Like I think sometimes we think about racism as like very individualized acts and not as our individual acts being the result of a system that oppresses people of color, um, which is really hard, but that's nuance. Like,
Mhm.
that's and that comes from like practicing and like you said, like acknowledging your mistakes. Like none of us are perfect. I've made mistakes, within my own community and others, but like being able to acknowledge that was wrong. What I did was wrong. What I said was wrong. I didn't know better, but now I do. And not only am I going to do better, but I'm going to work to make sure others do better as well. And like the approach, like you said, like it's ongoing. It's never going to stop, you know, until racism ends, which racism in general is, I think, with a lot of white people, well meaning and otherwise, because they look at racism as really heinous acts, you know, like lynching and murders and the KKK, that when they're confronted with situations that are not those, like things like touching a black person's hair or saying they don't see race, they are so offended, like, oh, I can't be seen as a racist. That's the person that kills black people, and
Mhm.
you're like, that's not like we have evolved from like, or so we think, I just recently learned this summer that a sundown town still exists in this country. So like, um, that was shocking to me. And I found that out after watching an HBO show. Like,
Mhm.
so, that, I mean, that really burst my bubble. But yeah, I think most people need to realize that on an everyday situation, not the extremes. Yeah, like a lot of the shit you do and say is rooted in racism. It doesn't make you a bad person necessarily. You can do and say things that are racist and you still be a good person, You just did this thing that was not a good thing. You have to acknowledge that and work through it, And I think a lot of people just get really shut off with like the like, oh my gosh, like how could I do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, you can do X, Y, Z and still be a racist,
Mhm.
Just like you can do X, Y, Z and still be a bigot or, be a homophobe, like homophobic, all of these things. Because your singular act, again, is an effect of a much bigger thing that you're not even dialed into, you don't recognize how your thing is like part of this like bigger machine.
Mm.
But like, see, like, I have a black friend, so I can't
Mhm.
be, or I have a black child and
Mm.
and I can't be, and it's like, yeah, you can, yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
truly can.
Yeah. Proximity never equals like
Right.
proximity is not an excuse or get out of jail free card or anything. And I do also feel like a lot of white people use proximity as an almost
Mm,
as a like pass to have
yeah.
to, or probably because they actually do believe that they're not a part of the problem. But like, I mean, even I, I read Me and White Supremacy over the summer and was like, oh damn, I still have so much work to do. And, and it's like, and I feel like I've been here doing the work for a long time, but there's just so much work to do.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
never done. And it's
Hmm.
going to be just this continuous process. And if you are in a relationship with a Black person or parenting a Black child, I think it means you have to double down on the work.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that you are, and it doesn't mean anything about you. All it means is you have to do more work than everyone else so that you're not causing more harm. And
Yeah.
I keep thinking about the book that we read, the Such a Fun Age, and
Hmm.
how, how that mom truly believes that she is like, and would appear on the outside to everyone else, like out here working on the Hillary campaign and standing up for women, and has, her super diverse group of friends in Brooklyn and or
Yeah.
wherever. I just was put Brooklyn in there. I don't even think she was Brooklyn, but she just felt that way to me.
Mhm.
And, and like, but even she has so much work to do, and her perception of herself is actively harming other Black people.
Right.
And so,
Right.
and it was like interesting timing to be reading that while we're having all these
Yeah.
conversations. So
Yeah. I mean, 100. And I think even the guy in that book that she dates
yes, and the guy.
too. Yeah. Because like, he, you know, was a white guy who all of his friends growing up were Black. And granted, I think he understood his positioning in that a little bit more than what the mom was applying on him. I think that was her
Mhm.
own shit. I think I didn't get 100% that from that character, but I do see how it almost felt like he was atoning for
Mm.
the mistake that she made for the rest of his life. So he surrounded
Mm.
himself with a Black community to be like, I don't know, that's a hard one. That I mean that we really should talk about that book because there's so much.
Yeah,
Um
that could be a whole separate.
but
Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, I agree with you. And um I just think that like yeah, like we there's there it's continuous. It never ends. And I know we said that before, but it really truly is. And I think that it goes with so many different things. And again, like I think when we talk about diversity and racism in this country, it is very black and white just because of the conflict, the history of this country and the way it was like built and formed. Um, but it's so nuanced and has so many layers to it. And I think, especially for people of color, we get to maybe explore the nuances a little bit more than white people for a lot of
Mhm.
different reasons. I keep seeing this debate online about cancel culture in general and whether it's fair, because it doesn't allow people to grow from their mistakes. Like the idea is if people are always getting called out for things that happened in their past, like how and like are not forgiven, then how can they like learn and do better? And my rebuttal to that is like the thing is, I think we are confusing like canceling with accountability
Yes.
and also follow up essentially because what we call cancel culture is maybe a couple weeks, months maybe of like flames to the ass like social media dragging, which I'm not gonna I'm like must feel bad, when you mess up to have a ton of people in your DMs and your mentions or whatever. But you also could just delete your social medias for a while and stay low. I haven't truthfully seen anybody be canceled and actually have to face a consequence for their action. Meaning, like, yeah, you may lose. a couple of sponsorships. Brands may want to not work with you. You may lose a couple contracts, but then that will die down, and slowly, whether you make amends and do the work or not, people start coming back into the fray.
Mhm.
So that's why I feel like cancel culture isn't actually a thing.
Mhm.
Cancel culture is like, a couple smacks on the wrist, maybe a couple punches to the face a few times. You lay low and you can come back, because unfortunately, like, people have short attention spans,
Mhm.
so uh and so a lot of that is on us too as audience members, is really holding these people and these brands and these networks to holding their feet to the fire to be like,
Mhm.
yeah, so this did happen in 2018 and we haven't seen this person get any better. Like, they
Mhm.
haven't done any
Exactly.
work
Yeah.
privately or publicly to fix what they've done. So you know what? Like, I'm not going to subscribe to your channel. I'm not going to buy your product until you force them to do the work. And I think it goes both ways. It's on us as a consumer, but like also on these brands, companies, and influencers also. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I feel like, I'm sure, and I think about this all the time. This is why I actually will never run for like public office. There's too many skeletons in my
No,
and
agree. Same.
like I know there's stuff that I've said on the internet wild when I was a kid. If it came up, I'd be embarrassed,
Yeah.
like that I ever said those things, or I
Mhm.
think now back to things that I've said like in high school about people that I'm like, wow, Charisse, like that's terrible. Like, I can't believe you thought that,
Mhm.
or said that, but I think one of the things that we as like subscribers to cancel culture don't do well is also, I think we sometimes focus too much on the deed that happened and not at the person at where they are in life at this moment. So what I mean is, like you said, there are things that you've done in your past that you are like, but I as your friend can acknowledge that, but I'm like, okay, but like, not to like take anything away from that, but like the work that Lindsay's doing now and has been doing for a long time, like before being called out on this thing, shows that like not only is she not that person anymore, but she's actively working to not ever be that person again. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Right.
And I think that's something I don't think a lot of people want to do. Like, I think we just like to call people out and be like, look, see, they did this. And like, yeah, we all have done things, but I think we're not also willing to like give people like to analyze where people are at the moment, and recognize that like we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, this thing
Mm.
could have
Yeah.
happened, but we also could be better people who are working towards being better. Now, if that person's still trash, yeah, still drag them. Like, they
Yeah.
absolutely do.
Right.
Like, drag them. They deserve it. If they haven't learned anything and aren't trying, and just the only thing that they've done is like allowed for time to pass, then absolutely, like, they shouldn't be rewarded.
Mhm.
And I think I think right now, like, we just allow time to pass by and people can like forget about things that happen. Um, and so I just don't feel like anybody really wants to hold anybody accountable. As someone who's been in situations like this before, I think what I would like a lot of white people to recognize is like, you may have that one black friend, you may have two black friends that allow you to say and do certain things, but then you need to recognize that we, again, are not a monolith. Our experiences are not all the same. So you can come across another black person who's like, hold up, you can't use that word. Or, I don't identify as this, or you cannot come at me this way. I don't know you, you know? And so I think, I think that that comes with the fact that as black people, oftentimes we get portrayed in this very specific way that makes all of our experiences the same. So when someone says, oh, it's okay to do this, and then someone sees that, they then go through the rest of their life being like, well, that black person said okay this, um and they're on a national platform, so it must be fine. And you're
Mhm.
like, no,
Yeah.
you
It,
know
it's interesting that you're saying that, because I've been thinking about, because this week I've really been like reflecting on, times that I've messed up and
yeah.
how I dealt with it. And And I was thinking about this time that it was became clear to me that just because I was invited to a cookout did not mean I was invited to like the universal cookout. And, the way that we behaved at our cookout is not the same as what everybody is okay with me behaving at their cookout. And
Mhm.
I just remember when I had that realization, like, oh, just because, and it was like, because when we were, back in our heyday, having a lot of fun.
Our wild, yeah.
Yeah, like there's a lot of shit just because of what we were all going through
Mhm.
together. That I think that was like almost like more, we just talked a lot more openly about certain things. And
Mhm.
because we were all in it together, I think there were some things that I could say in our circle, but then going into another circle of people who don't know me or whatever, or have whatever experiences they have,
Mhm.
it's not that, it doesn't make it okay there,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it's not, and like, but I had this like problematic thing going on where I was like, well, it's okay with, it's okay with Charisse and Tony when I say stuff like this, so it should be okay with y'all. But like, but all the experiences aren't the same, so it's just not
Right.
okay. And it
Yeah.
took me like a while to understand that and grasp it, and also to understand that like when I would say things that were taken a different way than I meant for them to be taken,
Yeah.
like that my response can't just be like, well, that's not me. So,
Yeah.
like there's a reason that people think, there is some kind of reason that people think that I had the intention I had in saying what I said.
Yeah.
And whether it's something that is in my control or something that's like just because I'm a white lady here at this
Yeah.
party, either way, there's some reason that people are interpreting my intention to be different than it's interpreted when I'm in a different circle of people, which means I have to consider that in things I'm in my actions and things I'm saying and doing. And I'm going to have to like work harder
Mhm.
to make sure that whatever it is that's in people's heads about me, like
Mhm.
there is some valid reason that they would interpret things I say in a certain way. So like, it's just because I know it's not who I am, like it doesn't make it any less, it doesn't make their side
Mhm.
less valid. I don't know, I'm having a really
Yeah.
hard time saying that, but
No, I mean, I'm following. Yeah, for sure. And again, I think that only comes with experiences,
mm,
and also recognizing that um I guess my biggest thing is like I want more people to understand that like we are human and have interesting ranges of identities. And I know I said that last time too, but like I really want to hammer it home. And like an interesting example I'll give is I was talking to um a former coworker, but he's also West Indian, like he's a first gen. And so we got into this conversation about using the N word. And I was telling him how it actually makes me really uncomfortable when people use it in my presence, um, and how I don't actually use the word. And um, and he was like, "Oh, he's like, well, like tell me more about that because I feel the same, because it's a word that like." Especially in the schools we worked in, like it gets used like all the time, like by our students, like whether it's good, bad, or the other, like it's just it's part of it's like, hey guy,
mhm.
So because I became like sensitized to it, but when I desensitized to it, but like in regular conversations with like other black friends who may like are African American and not West Indian or African or whatever, like, and they use it, I often find myself being like, like dissent, like it's just like the word to me is not very pleasing. That's an aside. So we were talking and I was like, is it strange that I don't feel like I should be allowed to say that word? And he was like, no, but tell me more. And I was like, well, it wasn't a word that I grew up hearing. Like my family's very West Indian. Not so much now, but like growing up, I grew up in a very West Indian household. I spent the first 5 years of my life going back and forth between Barbados and the US. I was raised by my aunts and my grandmother. Like it was not a word that I ever heard in our household. Now, it's not to say that it's not been used on the island or any other parts of the Caribbean. It's just not one that we use. And I never really actually heard the N word until I came to Virginia, with both the A and the ER. So again, I felt like, and this kind of goes back to last week when I was talking about like applying Black experiences to my life that I didn't necessarily engage with, and that's one of them. It's like, I don't like using the word because again, it doesn't sound pleasing to me, but I also feel like I don't have a right to use it. It's like not it's not like, it's not part of my cultural vernacular. So I'm like, I'm okay not having that. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like if me, a Black woman, can be okay being like, that is not a word that's part of my vocabulary and that I don't really have a right to use, I never can understand why like white people like really fight so hard to be able to use it. Like, I'm not talking about like the racists who like just drop N bombs on everybody, but I'm talking about like, well, meaning white folks of like my Black friend, or who grew up with Black people using it, and so they felt like it was okay for them to use it and whatnot. I'm like, I don't really see what your argument is. Like, to me, it's just like a no brainer.
Mhm.
um, but again, it's like my very specific experience in the culture I grew up in, and like I wish more people could just understand that like there are layers and nuances within, like, again, the diaspora. And I think unfortunately that also comes back to like the media, how our history is taught to us and what we've deemed as like the the progression of Black culture, Blackness, the evolution of Black people in America,
Mhm.
like I think I saw this post on social media the other day that was like, the way that America teaches Black history is like, all y'all Black folks were slaves, then Abraham Lincoln freed y'all, then nothing happened, and then civil rights, and then the rest of y'all got to play professional sports. Then we let you have Obama, and then here we are. Like, and I'm like, that's exactly
That's
it.
exactly
Like,
it. Yeah,
like,
and the one I saw also said, and Malcolm X didn't have to be so mean. And
yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I really like, I actually cackled when I read that because I was like,
yeah,
it's so true. Like, it's
it's
so almost, it's very linear and there are no offshoots like at all. We know like the roots run deep and the history is messy and there's just so much we
mhm.
don't learn, and it's frustrating as somebody who occupies so many spaces within the diaspora because I'm like, this is not my experience,
Mhm.
but sometimes I feel like it's forced upon me because representation matters when they refuse to tell a different narrative. um and I say all that too, was like, I think, not I think, those stories are very important to be told because so much of those stories have been erased just because of the nature of things. But also we tell some other stories as well, because people need to understand there's like more to it than, you know Harriet freed slaves and then we got Barack Obama, like bada bing bada boom.
And Matt James is it the representation in
Yeah.
2021. And that's all y'all need.
And Matt James is because Harriet Tubman freed the slaves and Obama became president, we get Matt James.